All right. Good morning, everybody. I have the dubious honor of being the first speaker with morning voice. So thank you. My name is Justin. I am one of the founders of Ninthco. We're one of today's sponsors. We are a digital agency here in Toronto. We work here in Toronto. Now we're kind of all across Canada since post-pandemic. We specialize in. We got our foundation as a technical SEO firm back around 2010, and then over time morphed to become a full stack, both SEO, PPC, and development agency, supporting the likes of George Brown College, Toronto Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, Leon's, and lots of other interesting clients. Before I jump into the topic, which is what? All over responding.
It's the first session.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. So the concept is, what the heck is headless? Can I just ask, how many, are any of you developers? Okay. All right, whoa, yeah. All right. And how many of you are like developing with modern frameworks versus, let's call them legacy stuff like WordPress, Drupal, Magento? So how many are like on modern frameworks? React, Next.js, Astro, so.
Okay. Drupal's modern.
Yeah. All right.
Shots fired.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the current state of the web. And this is going to, the purpose behind this talk was not to be a tech talk, even within the tech track. It's more to translate the concepts of headless to where there may be some non-technical folks or marketing folks, content folks. So let's talk about how things are. And listen, I've been a developer since early 2000s. I love WordPress, Drupal, and all of these beautiful open source CMSs and frameworks that let us build really quickly, right? Back in the day when we were like FTPing HTML files and PHP includes, like that was laborious. And so CMSs, platforms, they let us do things faster, but they also have struggled scaling. So these are just some snapshots we took from the news. I'll give you actually a real world example. One of our clients, we landed them, they're like, okay, we're gonna stage our Black Friday specials over the entire week. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's Black Friday. Like, well, yeah, but last year when we had our inflood of customers on Black Friday, it just took our servers to crawl. We couldn't handle 10x the transactions. Like, so your solution is to make it Black Friday. They had to do that so they wouldn't kill their servers. And this is common. We see sites go down because of even just simple like DDoS attacks, as you all know. This is no joke, cyber attacks. Another client, e-commerce brand, they were doing about 50 to 100K sales transactions per day. Their site was taken down through a spear phishing attack on their email server, held for ransomware. They paid over $10 million in cryptocurrency to get the website back, while their site was down for 3 weeks. So imagine the impact to lost revenue, impact to their brand. It was awful. Now, how many of you enjoy working with the SEO team? Okay, so you get like, the SEO team will be like, oh, we ran the Google's Core Web Vitals page speed scores and our LCP metrics are really bad, you need to fix it. And you're like, here's a list of things that Google says you should do. And you're like, oh, okay, great, but you can't do that because that's not how Drupal, you can't just take the scripts and remove them, and you can't just defer rendered blocking elements. So SEOs are like, do this, and you want to make them happy, but you're like, would you like me to spend 30 hours to move that script? Like, it's probably not in the client's best interest, right? So we're typically limited by what CMSs, platforms, hosting servers are capable of doing. And even if you spend all that time doing that, and now someone's like accessing your site from a remote location, they're skiing in Blue Mountain, it's like, wow, their metrics from their phone, from their like 2G connection, are actually going to bring down your Core Web Vitals score. It's not exactly fair. Now, how many of you have seen a graph like this after replatforming or changing domains, redirecting? Like, this is terrifying, right? The marketing team is like, okay, we're not going to break anything, right? Like, I don't think I'm going to break anything. And then like, you do the DNS cutover, and then the next 2 days, they're like, where's all our traffic? Where's our leads? Where's our sales? This is so common. In fact, it's so common that when we worked with other agencies, when they're sort of handling the design and we do the development and SEO, the client's like, okay, what should we expect after cutover? Like, how much of a downturn in our SEO should we, like 50%, 75%, or how long? I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, why would you expect a downturn? But they just know, when we do a cutover, you're going to have this dip. It's just natural, right? And from our perspective, it's not okay. Why is it? Why are all these things happening? And this is where I've got some nice animations. Monolithic architecture. So this, if you understand architectural diagrams, this is a highly abstracted, very basic one. But this is, for all intents and purposes, what a Drupal, WordPress, you name it, this is what the architecture looks like. You've got a server, if I were to like wrap around that. Within that server lives your database, or databases, your business logic, your data access, your presentation layer. It's all in one thing. So when we say monolithic, we don't mean old, we mean like one system, right? So which means, it's one system. We're responsible for all those services. So Black Friday, Cyber Monday, DDoS attack. Often, when you're on one of those systems, you've also got shared resources. Even if you're on a VPS, it's still shared hardware resources. Very hard to scale. So let's say you have a North American retailer and they're ready to scale internationally. What does that mean? Well, we got to now move you to a bigger server. It's a very painful undertaking. Also, it's a single point of vulnerability. Your IT guy leaves his password on like a post-it note on the monitor, and janitor can scoop that up. Any questions about this? Am I? Okay, good.
I have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was thinking about these ransom attacks and they paying millions of dollars. Why they just can't point the DNS to a different server instead of paying for it?
That is possibly an option at times. I mean, it depends on the type of ransomware attack. In this case, that is a possibility, but of course there's time and lost. There's lost time in getting that spun up elsewhere. It depends on how it's all set up in the environment. But I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about this, which is Headless. So I choose the next evolution because this is EvolveDrupal. We consider Headless to be the next stage of, as much as like there was HTML, and then there was server-side programming, PHP, ASP, .NET, and then there was CMSs. What we think of this is like, and now there's Headless. So let's talk about what that means. In the paradigm of Headless, and no, I did not make this, so I copied it from somewhere on the web. What it means is all of your services, or are often sometimes called microservices, exist on their own right. So you want content management? Which content management system do you want to use? It doesn't matter. You like Drupal? Use Drupal. You want to use something a little more modern? Storyblock, Prismic, Agility, use that instead. It doesn't really matter because it's whatever your content editors like and want to use, and as long as it can expose the data through a secured API, the content is the content and it lives where it lives. You also need e-commerce. You don't have to, so here's the other crazy thing. If like you're on WordPress and you want e-commerce, what's your choice? You got to throw WooCommerce on there, and you got to live with its terrible data architecture. If you're a Headless, you want e-commerce, no problem. Use whatever e-commerce platform meets your information security needs, product catalog needs, globalization needs. It doesn't really matter. And that paradigm just repeats and repeats for any type of service you want to use. They're all secured behind APIs, and then your beautiful front end. This is where the magic happens. Can be built in a modern framework like Next.js, SvelteKit, Astro. The amazing thing behind these is they're kind of like, sorry, I need to just gonna take a quick sip. The beauty behind these frameworks is you've got a bunch of developers who just keep asking the same question. Why do we keep doing this over and over and over? Building in this way that has page speed constraints, caching constraints, server-side rendering, client-side rendering. So gradually they've iterated, most of them around the React framework on top of that. And then they've come up with these beautiful modern front ends that can connect all your services, pull the content, pull the data, statically build it into a slick, elegant, optimized, responsive front end, and then deploy it through serverless architecture. That's the beauty of all this. So now your website doesn't live on a server. Your website front end lives on global data centers stored as static HTML, which can be served up. So again, if you're a retailer and you're expanding out of North America into Australia, UK, Europe, when people are accessing your site from those locations, they're getting a locally cached static version of the site, of the data, if you're using edge data. So it's just instant wherever you are. And if you need to scale up for Black Friday, you don't need to move to a bigger server. It's beautiful because when you deploy onto these CDNs, your site lives, it exists as a serverless function. Meaning if you have 10x the traffic, the provider simply just throws more CPU at it, more memory at it. You scale up, you pay for the milliseconds of usage, and then as Black Friday, whatever, goes beyond Black Friday, you scale back down. So it's a beautiful, elegant solution, allows you to scale. And if you were attacked, so like put yourself in the shoes of a hacker, and you were trying to execute a ransomware attack on this website, like where would you attack it? There's no connection to the data. The front end, which lives on a cloud all around the world, does not know where the data resides. It has no access to it. When it was built, it accessed it through a secured API and no longer has access. So we call it virtually unhackable. It has no surface area. Yeah. And then now your page speed. So this is a true page speed metrics report from an actual site we built. Lo and behold, it's our own website. But 100, this is a theoretically impossible score, right? Like Google did not build Core Vitals for you to get 100 out of 100. It's to tell you all the things you need to fix. But with these front-end frameworks, they're like, okay, yeah, let's just solve for all of those things, and then when we build it, we'll just make sure we build it in a way that when Google scans the site, it just check, it's perfect. The nice thing is, like I said, use your front end of choice. Again, so you want to use Drupal on the back end, fine. You want to use Storybook, fine. It doesn't really matter. But your developers are happy because on the front end, they can use the frameworks, the languages, the technologies that they like, they enjoy. And then, of course, this works from an employer's perspective because as you need to grow the team, if you have employee churn and plug a new developer into an existing project, it can just pick right back up because the languages are technology agnostic. Speed is incredible. So things like server-side rendering, talk to it. Is everyone familiar with what a CDN is? Yeah, okay. So like your website exists on a CDN, similar to like CloudFront technology. Image optimization are baked into it. It's as the site's being built and deployed, every single image on the site is pre-optimized. And then this is fascinating. Who here understands what the virtual DOM is? All right, so you all know what page loading means. Like you click a link, client server response. So client goes to the server and says, hey, give me that page. And then the client sends back a header, says 200, here it is, and then it sends the bytes, and then it loads the bytes and renders on the screen, right? That's the old school way of how pages have loaded since the beginning of HTTP. However, the React team came up with this concept of like a virtual DOM. They're like, well, we don't need to really do that. What we can do is we can create in memory a representation of the page. We'll prefetch the data, put it in there, and then, because we know you're gonna load that page anyways. And then when you click the link, we'll just swap it out under the hood. You're not actually hitting the server for it anymore. So when you're clicking, and I mean, do this. You can navigate our website. Another website we did recently was Exclaim.ca or Media Publisher. Click around. You'll see that there's no like load time. It instantly renders the page, re-renders the page on screen, much like using an app. I've already beaten this one to death, but basically your website now lives on a global CDN. This is just so cool because it basically means like this guy's getting your website as fast as this person over here, as this person over here. It is I hate to use this, or a democratization of web data. So, side by side, with monolithic, again, CMSs, they've been wonderful. We love them, we've loved them. They made our lives so much better. But they have downsides. Cybersecurity risks, limited resources. SEO can only be improved to the extent of the capabilities that they give you. With Headless, it's virtually unhackable. You have virtually infinite, what we call indefinite resources through the use of serverless technology, serverless scaling, and you can achieve perfect page speed, perfect SEO scores. And I should mention, actually meant to put a slide in here. What that means, if you think of it from, go back to that slide where like the organic traffic dropped off, right? But imagine you're now migrating to Headless. So think of it from a crawler's perspective. You have the same website, same content. In fact, you can keep the exact same URL structure. But what you're doing is you're really just replacing the front end. Right? So now the front end, what used to be a slow, kludgy, waiting for scripts to load, waiting for server response, all of a sudden when Google or other search engines crawl the page, they're just getting a lightning fast version of that exact same website. Post cutover, at very least, you should see a graph that looks like this. But in our experience, what you often see is a graph that looks like this, because it's as though you've just re-optimized the very same website. Even though you've completely overhauled it, completely gutted it, from a search engine perspective, they're just getting the same site but faster. Anticipation of questions, and so I'll just go through these quickly, and then there's time for you to actually ask if you have other questions. How does cost compare? Typically it is higher upfront cost because it's just more dev work, but truthfully it's lower TCO, total cost of ownership. Reason being, like how many security patches and version updates and end of life do you have with regular CMSs? What is the cost of your site being taken down, held for ransom, right? These are very expensive things that you don't have with Headless. When does Headless make sense? So if a website has SEO requirements, it will need to scale, or security is critical. So yeah, then Headless is probably a good solution. When does it not make sense? If you've got a small website, like an event like this, it would be overkill to create a Headless website for an event, for a microsite, for like a mom and pop shop. It just doesn't make sense. It's like using skyscraper architecture to build a cottage.
Or an internal website.
Or an internal, yeah, exactly. Unless your developers love it for some reason. Yeah, internal, just spin up a Drupal website. Are there downsides? Yeah, change your version. It's sometimes hard. If someone has worked with a particular CMS, we to this day, we have enterprise customers coming to us with RFPs that say, we want WordPress with Divi Builder. Are you kidding? That's what I've used it. I'm comfortable with it. It's good for SEO. No, it's not. But it's hard to get people out of that paradigm, especially if they're not deeply technical and they've been trained or they've learned on YouTube. It's tricky to get people out of that mindset. Obviously, as I said, it's more development. Also, bad implementations. For us, this is great because it's a major source of pipeline. Is when you have, if you're not familiar with Headless and you're trying to deploy your first project, it's hard to shift out of sort of monolithic paradigms. So it's important to understand the patterns, best practices before getting into it. And that's it. So now time for questions. Yes? Oh.
In our current Drupal site, we kind of had mixed. We had a lot of data pushed by the API, but what we did is we pushed the API, the data from our cloud, and to the local, but we still stored it in the local Drupal database, because we found out like for the API, the data source part, we just push all the raw data or whatever. But at the front end, the web developer or whatever they wanted to change in the front end, they can easily to manipulate using the view, all those ones to create. If we all, my question is, if we all switch to the headless, like we have no data on the Drupal here, it doesn't mean that every time they change something to the front you have to push back to the API, have to do it, have to modify the data, have to you push some of the work from front end to the API. Like who build the API have to match the data set what you needed from front end. So we had that issues in the back. So right now we push the data, but we still store it in the Drupal.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and that might be the right solution. I mean, the technical solution should always meet the business requirements. We've seen instances where the customer wanted to go completely headless on the front end, but it was important to keep whether some of the data or the content living in a legacy system. And so, in those cases, we actually have moved much of the site to, say, a headless CMS, and then we just reverse proxy the rest of the site to, in this case, actually it was also Drupal. And so the content editors can keep doing what they were doing there, and then the marketers manage the marketing content through a headless CMS. But for that particular business, it was the right solution. So yeah, it might be fine.
Oh, so is it possible for in our situation, we had an API we had another if we add another middle layer, like another Drupal as middle layer, and so the raw data still push to that middle layer Drupal, but some of our web app data, they can go into using the view or something to massage the data, and then I guess the Drupal easy to push this API data, right, to another headless front end. So that make it, because we do have the issue of the speed, loading up the data, all those ones. I guess is this solution you solve like security, speed, but also still making the flexibility for using the Drupal platform?
Yeah.
Added to it.
Well, I think the answer is it really depends. It just depends on how the architecture has been defined. I can't say without actually having seen it, but there's a good chance if the developers know what they're doing, that it's been secured properly, it could be fine. I don't know though without having actually seen it.
See that. But have you had that case, like using as the Drupal as the backend, push data to another headless Drupal?
Yeah, exactly. Basically, if you go back to like this slide, the backend is almost irrelevant. Like it's complete. There's a separation of concerns. Like the front end doesn't even really know what the back end is. Like in this whole API layer, it's as long as it's designed to be secured and can deliver the data in a way that the front end can consume. If this still stays Drupal in the back end, there's no reason why it would have to change.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Last one, maybe?
Okay.
Well, I can ask one issue. I mean, there's definitively a trend with CMSs like WordPress and people to go to a more visual approach in terms of editing with like the Gutenberg or the builder for Drupal. How do you see that being reconciled with a fully headless approach when you do the front end, especially if they want some kind of preview of their content?
So it's happening, I'd say, in parallel with, headless CMSs are not new. They've been around since 16, 15. And when they came out, they were far too technical in nature. It's like, well, just put your content in these blocks, and trust me, when it comes here, it's going to look nicely. But marketers have been saying, no, when we use WordPress, it's visual. We use Drupal, it's visual. We want to see it. So what you're seeing on the headless side is Storyblock, Prismic are leading the way in creating a real-time presentation layer with your content, so you can see it visually. How that differs from like the Drupal and WordPress model is, in order to achieve that visual stylistic look, they're actually stuffing tags and content delimiters into the data tables that were originally just meant for content, which is fine for smaller sites, but when you get into larger scale deployments, like that's when the data integrity begins to break down. I think, and the way I always think back to it is like, whether it's the Gutenberg editor or say WooCommerce, like they're still just stuffing all of these content and tags into like original data tables that have like 3 fields, and then pulling it out and using logic to determine what it is. It's very difficult. You have to do a migration. There's no real, the data entities are not there, the relationships are not there. But, yeah, so I don't love it, but you can make it work.
So you use a more semantic approach, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, everyone.